Episode 4 Training Wheels. Master, Rabineau huffed and puffed, struggling to catch his breath. This is ridiculous! Nonsense, my boy! The old mage turned from his perch atop the buggy and peered back at Rabineau, who was currently struggling to pull a cart of his own. This is a very specialized training. The cart Rabineau pulled, for the most part, was your stereotypical hand cart. Small in size, as lightweight as a wood cart could be, and it even had cushioned wraps around the hand grips. All in all, it was a pretty nice hand cart. What made this little cart into Rabineau's nightmarish struggle of the day was the fact that Linram had replaced the nice round wheels with wheels that were not round. These nasty wheels had 12 sides. 12 flat sides. Each revolution of the wheel was a jerky stutter stop of pulling the weight past the fulcrum until the next side smacked into the ground. At first, the exercise seemed mundane, tame even for Linram. Yet, as the first and then the second mile crawled by, Rabineau felt the strain of pulling even the lightweight cart for so long. Each jarring smack of the wheel's flat sides hitting the ground sent shockwaves up his arms. The cushioned hand grips helped tremendously, but even that didn't stop the blisters that began bubbling up on Rabineau's palm. It was around mile 4 that he first experienced a blister popping. At first, he felt the relief of the pressure as it ruptured, gushing fluid between his fingers and coating his palm, and then he felt the horrendous pain of the raw skin beneath being exposed to the jarring of the cart once more. My blisters have blisters, Rabineau panted. Please, master, this is torture. Whoa, Slippy! Linram pulled back on the reins, slowing the donkey to a stop. Whoa now! Good girl! The sly old mage patted the donkey's rump before dismounting from the buggy and coming to stand before Rabineau. What is your complaint, boy? Rabineau sighed in frustration. My complaint, he began sourly, is that you put That's a typo on my bad. My complaint, he began sourly, is you put these ridiculous wheels on the cart, and the stress from pulling this thing is tearing apart my hands. He peeled his hands off of the grips and showed his palms to his master, blisters and raw spots shining in the sunlight. Why aren't you wearing gloves? Linram asked sagely. Gloves? Rabineau said dully. You never gave me any gloves. Really? Linram came closer and peered into the handcart. Looks like there's a pair in the bottom of the cart there. He regarded his pupil. Did you even look? Master, Rabineau whined. With or without gloves, this cart is wrecking my muscles. Linram said, stroking his beard. I suppose it is time to show you how to use these wheels. Rabineau only stared at the old man, sure his eccentrics had gone a tad too far. These wheels are made of pine, Linram said with a twinkle in his eye. Can you tell me why that is significant? Because if it was made of metal, it would be way heavier. A decent guess, Linram bobbled his head a bit, but incorrect. Pine is a very special kind of tree for wheel mages. It grows fast and more often than not, straight. Additionally, pine is incredibly susceptible to will magic. What? Rabineau asked blankly. How can a tree be sensitive to will magic? Linram scoffed. Don't be daft, boy. Will magic imbues every aspect of life on this planet. Just because it's a tree and not a human does not mean they cannot be more or less sensitive to it, just as humans are. Okay, Rabineau began, utterly confused. So what does this mean? Now you are asking the right question, Rabbit, Linrem beamed. It means that pine trees and the wood we can gain from them have some pretty spectacular properties. The pine wood that went into the wheels on this cart came from a special grove of pines that I have been tending for centuries. You have your own grove of pine trees? Linrem blinked at Rabineau, looking as if the question posed to him was utterly ludicrous. That is besides the point, Rabbit. I swear, you go from asking bad questions to good questions to absurd questions. The inside of your brain must be a nightmare. Fine, Rabineau replied in exasperation, rolling his eyes at the impossible old man. What is so special about the pine and the wheels? To be fair, the wheels are in the pine, Linrem cackled madly before returning to Sombre as quick as a blink. I spent quite some time willing the pines in my grove into shapes and sizes that are beyond unnatural for the trees. These wheels came from the same tree, which I convinced to grow in the shape of a wheel. How does a tree grow in the shape of a wheel? It doesn't, Linrem replied, unless I convince it to. Then it's really simple. But, Rabineau whined, how? You see, Linrem began, trees are not like humans. You and I had a set of instructions for our bodies to follow in order for a human to be created. Those instructions are rigid and cannot be deviated from, else the end product is not viable. In other words, we can't have an arm growing from our stomachs. It just wouldn't work. Trees, however, are far more unrestrained. Their only imperative is to grow towards the sunlight, spreading their branches to soak in the life-giving rays. So, up and out. That still doesn't answer my question, Master. Let me finish, Linrem scoffed. I swear, kids these days. Anyways, what was I saying? Ah, yes, up and out. So, if you can find yourself a sapling, preferably one that is fast-growing, as the pines are, you can use your will to convince the tree to grow in spectacular ways, as long as their two imperatives are still met, up and out. So, Rabineau began flatly, you're saying that you convinced a pine tree to grow in the shape of a wheel? I can be very persuasive, he winked at his apprentice. Okay, fine, Rabineau said. You willed the tree to grow into a wheel. How does that information help me now? Good, Rabbit, the twinkle back in his eye. Back to asking the good questions. You see, he began, walking over to one of the wheels and laying a hand on it. Pine also has an incredible desire to remain. Once you cut the tree down and make boards from its trunks, those boards will remain straight. To bow or bend, they will only go so far before literally breaking apart in resistance. The same is true for these wheels. When I cut the pine down, these wheels were pristine and perfectly round. I had to cut further to make the flat sides on each. Why would you do that? Rabineau blurted out. Seems to me like the original design of the wheel was pretty damn good. Linrem smiled wickedly. Because if I didn't cut the sides into the wood, then I wouldn't be able to do this. He stroked the wood lovingly, and the flat sides of the wheel began ballooning up, nearly making it wholly round once more. Whoa, Rabineau said in awe. That's incredible. That is what makes this a very specialized training, Rabbit, Linrem continued. Though the wheels yearn to return to their original shape, it will take constant and precise application of your will to maintain the shape. Understand? Rabineau only stared at his master blankly. Linrem sighed before going on. You can make the wheel round to ease your struggles. However, it is not an easy task to pull a cart while convincing the wheels to stay round. If you let your concentration waver—" Linram waved a hand at the wheel, and the wood sank back into the flat-sided shape. "You lose its shape. But this is also your first application of will magic in motion. Thus far, all of your castings have been static events, all done while meditating so you can be more in sync with your magic. Now you must apply what you have learned while we travel. Truly, the choice is yours. Either struggle with the flat-sided wheels, which strengthens your physical self, or struggle to keep the wheels round, strengthening your spiritual self. Either way." The old man shrugged and walked back over to the buggy, vaulting onto the seat easily and turning to look at his apprentice. "Be sure to keep up." Without waiting to see what Rabineau would do, Linram turned back to Slippy and coaxed the donkey back into motion. Rabineau stared after his master for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. It was clear to Rabineau that the crafty old mage had waited this long to explain the true nature of the wheels in order to tire him out. Now that the physical strength was beginning to waver, the thought of making the wheels round was incredibly enticing. But how would he maintain his casting while in motion? For one thing, he wouldn't be able to engage as well unless he pulled the cart one-handed, and that would certainly be a struggle with his body already taxed. That got Rabineau thinking of how his master was able to do a great deal of castings without touching his third eye. Was there a trick to that? There were still castings that the old mage would brush his fingers along his forehead for, but the majority of his magic was done without it. Yet, the tenet of will magic was very clear. You needed 3 things in order to cast, one of which was touching your third eye, releasing the magic. How was he supposed to release the magic without making that contact? "You're overthinking it." Rabineau started, jumping and yelping before spinning around to stare at the handcart. Eris was now sitting on the cushioned bench, watching Rabineau with an expression that radiated extreme boredom. "Where the hell did you come from?" The cat regarded Rabineau coolly before she went on. "Quite a question to ask a gal, but I suppose you are about that age now. You see, when a mommy cat and a daddy cat love each other very much—" "You know that's not what I meant, Eris," Rabineau cut in, blood rushing to his face. "How long have you been here?" "Long enough," she said shortly. "Were you ever planning on catching up to Lin? Or were you hoping he would notice your absence until he came back along this way?" Rabineau scowled. "I was going to catch up." He paused. "I was just trying to figure out how to cast in motion." "Oh, I could see that much," Eris shot back. "And I'm telling you that you are overthinking it." His scowl deepened. "What do you mean?" "Will magic is subtle and nuanced, boy," Eris said. "How many times must Lin repeat that before it sinks into your thick skull?" "That's like telling me the sky is blue, Eris," Rabineau snarled. "No shit! That does nothing to help me." Eris moved in a blur, going from the seat to the hand grips and back again. She sat there, licking her paw, as if she hadn't moved at all. It wasn't until Rabineau felt the blood dripping from his face that the pain of her strike sank in. Eris had slashed Rabineau across the face from ear to chin in one neat, clean cut. "Take that as a warning, boy," Eris glared at Rabineau. "You will not disrespect the eternal cat." Rabineau dabbed at his bloody jawline with the sleeve of his shirt, wincing at the sharp pain of the shallow cut. He took a deep breath and looked back at Eris. "My apologies, Eris. I did not mean to offend. I'm just very frustrated. Do not be so foolish as to think you may take your frustrations out on me simply because I am a cat, she said, yellow eyes locked onto Rabideau. I am far more ancient than any of my kind, and certainly more than you. I've been present for so many castings of will magic that it changed my very being. And in case it hasn't truly sunk in yet, I too am able to cast Rabbit. Rabideau flinched as if he had been struck again, the truth of her words sinking with the unexplainable abilities the cat exhibited. Oh, was all he could manage in his shock. Eris sighed. If all pupils are this difficult, it is no wonder Lynn took so few. Will you tell me about Aridin? Rabideau blurted out, Eris's words invoking the ravenous curiosity the boy had developed towards the only other apprentice his master had taken. No, came Eris's sharp reply. Focus on the task at hand. Lynn is practically out of view now. Rabideau started and stared after his master, seeing that Eris was right. The cart was disappearing quickly. The buggy, was disappearing quickly over the horizon, a small dust cloud marking its steady progress. Rabideau swore and began pulling the cart, wheels jerking back into stuttery motion. Eris leapt onto Rabideau's shoulder with a cry of indignation. You could have warned me, you know, she said into his ear. Riding in that cart is extremely unpleasant with how you are pulling it. Excuse me. Then help me fix it, Rabideau said through clenched teeth, the restarting of the cart flaring up his still raw palms. Fine, Eris snapped, and suddenly the wheels were round, their motion turning into smooth revolutions. Rabideau moaned in relief as the cart became infinitely easier to pull. Thank you, Eris. Don't thank me yet, the cat warned. I'm not going to do this forever. I'm going to teach you how to cast in motion, or you'll be pulling this ridiculous cart by yourself. Okay, Rabideau said. Then please teach me how to cast in motion. Eris purred. We may make a respectable mage out of you yet. Just over an hour later, Rabideau pulled his cart into the small town of Arthan, the nearest town to Twilight Chateau, and quickly located Slippy, who was tied up next to the buggy, drinking water from a long trough. Rabideau took a look at the donkey, making sure her needs were seen to, before he ventured into the tavern to hopefully find his master. It didn't take long to locate the old man, sitting at the bar and animatedly narrating a story for the gathered patrons. And then I said to the lass, "That's not an eel, that's my trouser snake." The bar erupted in laughter, men slapping tabletops and knees alike in their shared mirth, adding to the appreciation for the punchline. Several of the men nearest Linrem clapped him on the shoulder amiably as the laughter began to ebb. That was clearly the climax of the show, because the group began breaking up, individuals wandering back to whatever chair or stool they originally occupied. One of the men next to Linrem saw Rabideau slowly approaching the bar and nudged the old man, nodding in the boy's direction. Linrem turned and smiled broadly as he greeted his apprentice. Ah, I see you finally made it to town, Not too exhausted, I hope? No, master, Rabideau answered. Eris showed up just after you left and helped. Of course she did, Linrem rolled his eyes. Now that she's awake again, she's going to be the biggest nuisance I've ever— Ow! Eris had appeared, perched on Linrem's shoulder, and had dug in what looked like all of her claws into Linrem's flesh. Oh, Lynn, she purred into his ear. I know you were not about to insult the internal cat, were you?
Oh, no, Eris, Linrim said through gritted teeth. I wouldn't dream of insulting you, my dear.
Oh, good, she said without releasing her claws. Now, where can a gal get a decent cut of fish around here? A short time later, the trio left the tavern. Eris still perched on Linrim's shoulder, though she was licking her paws contentedly. The old mage walked over to the buggy and began pulling out small bundles, carefully laying them into the back of Rabineau's handcart. Eris gave a snort of indignation at all of the motion and leapt clear into the driver's seat, where she promptly curled up. Linrem finished loading and motioned for Rabineau to take hold of the cart.
Don't worry, boy,
Linrem said, reaching down and caressing the wheels, making them smooth and round.
These products won't do well with all of your shaking and jarring them about. You'll be practicing more on the return trip.
I'm overjoyed, master, I assure you, Rabineau said in a flat tone.
Oh, we'll see about that, Linrim said with a twinkle in his eye. Now come on, we have deliveries to make.
The pair began strolling through town, Linrem leading the way and Rabineau pulling the cart to follow. 2 doors down from the tavern, they reached Linrem's first customer. Excuse me again. The old mage rapped on the door smartly and took a step back, folding his hands behind his back. The door swung open and a very large woman appeared in the frame. Lynn, she said with a wide smile, I was wondering when you might be wandering into town.
Miss Pinzer, Linrim bowed deeply. It is lovely to see you. However, if you recall my last visit, I did tell you I'd be back today.
Oh, please, Lynn, she said, fluttering her eyelashes. Call me Sheila.
I'd rather not, Lynn said quietly, as he turned back to the cart and produced a tall glass bottle that had a wonderfully bright and cheery gold concoction inside. Now, as I told you when you placed the order, I cannot ensnare the senses or bewitch the mind. Love potions are truly fiction, madame. However, he flourished the bottle and held it forward for Miss Pinzer to take. She delicately took the bottle and then continued. What you have here is a perfume so delectable and tantalizing that those that smell it will be drawn towards the wearer. Be warned, it is anyone who smells it. The effect doesn't last long, though, so be charming.
Oh, Lynn, the woman said with a tittering laugh that Rabineau thought akin to nails on a chalkboard. You continue to surprise me.
I assure you, Lynn said slowly, it is I who is surprised every time you order.
I have to keep you on your toes, she said with a wicked grin. Someone must.
Is that what you call it? He shot back, raising an eyebrow. I was under the impression that you were making every effort to beguile the governor into courting you.
She purred, eyes twinkling. You read me like a warning label.
And yet here we are, Linrim replied. My fee, please, ma'am.
Sheila Pinzer laughed and fished a purse from somewhere just inside her home, opening the small pouch and producing 3 crisp notes, dark blue, 150 Jill bills. She handed them over to Linrem, who quickly counted the bills and went to hand the third back.
300 Jill, Linrem said, as we discussed last time.
Oh, that's for your troubles, Sheila winked and blew a kiss at Linrem. Until next time, Lenny boy. Linrem shivered, and Rabineau did not think it had anything to do with being cold. The pair walked on as the old mage, tucked the bills into his own purse, which appeared and disappeared into his voluminous robes. Master, Rabineau asked tentatively.
Yes?
Linrem was preoccupied and didn't even look over at Rabineau. Has Miss Pinzer always been so... Rabineau searched for the right word. Desperate? Linram stopped in his tracks and regarded his pupil sharply. Sheila is not desperate. She's very lonely. There's a subtle difference, but it speaks volumes. Doesn't seem like much of a difference to me, Rabineau shrugged. Get another decade or so under your belt and you'll understand, Linram said. That is an aspect of life that you must learn on your own. For now, Linram began walking again. Trust that I will not take on such unscrupulous customers, and do not speak ill of them. Rabineau blushed, embarrassed. I'm sorry, master. I swear, boy, Linram said with incredulity. You ask the most outrageous questions. The pair continued in silence, delivering the goods the old mage brought to fulfill the orders of his customers, who ranged from Sheila Pinzer to the barber, Phil Ramey, even the astute steam engineer, Zacharias Fonts. The last had always been a curiosity for Rabineau. Mr. Fonts was an eccentric young man, incredibly pale from never setting foot outside of his workshop, with a shock of blonde hair so blonde it was nearly white. His wide, deep blue eyes peered out from his goggles, making him appear incredibly bug-like to Rabineau. The conversations he had with Linram were often short and filled with jargon that Rabineau just did not understand. Whatever Rabineau asked about the man, Linram would shrug. He's perhaps the most brilliant steam engineer this world has seen yet, Linram answered. Most of his inventions go straight to the capital, as anything that is truly valuable tends to go, so we don't see them around here. But as I understand it, he has devised machinery that can traverse terrain faster and more efficiently than our standard donkey, mule, and horse teams. Rabineau scoffed. Without the animals, how are they supposed to steer? Linram had simply shrugged once more. I'm sure he has that part figured out. If it's true, it'll change the face of transportation across the empire. But aren't you curious to how it works? Rabineau had asked his master. It was Lin's turn to scoff. Hells no. I have my own work to focus on. He dabbles not in will magic, so it is not any of my concern. Rabineau was recalling the conversation to keep himself from asking the questions his master found so incessant. As the pair finished their rounds and returned to Slippy in the buggy, still parked in front of the tavern where they had been left. Linram was directing Rabineau and checking everything over and getting resettled for the return journey when a deep voice hailed him from the road behind them. The pair turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man, deeply tanned from what little skin showed under his shiny plate mail armor. He may have had a handsome face in the past, but now it was crisscrossed with ropey scars that covered him from forehead to collarbone, giving him a permanent scowl and an unpleasant aura. The signet of the royal family, a dragon curled around a tower, breathing fire into the air, sat upon his breast like the seal was a part of his person, not just a symbol of his power. Linram stiffened and scowled when he laid eyes upon the man. Darkly? The man gave a cruel half-smile. So glad you remember my name this time, Linram. I'd hate to have to remind you. Linram's hands balled into fists. What do you want? The man laughed, even his mirth dripping with cruelty. Straight to the point, as always. You should expect nothing less by now, Linram shot back. He nodded, conceding. As much as it pleases me to converse with you, I am here on official business. My answer remains the same, Linram's voice hardened to a diamond-sharp edge. There is nothing you or your king can do or say to change my mind. I only wish for a moment of your time. He glanced towards Rabineau. In private.
And this is the quickest way to get you the hells out of here?
Well, the man smiled. Certainly the most civil.
Linrim turned to Rabineau, speaking softly. Stay here. Watch the buggy. Make sure the boy doesn't do anything stupid. What? Rabineau asked, confused. Linrim blinked, as if seeing Rabineau for the first time. I was talking to Eris. He then spun on his heels and followed the mysterious figure into the tavern once more, leaving Rabineau to sit in the buggy and wonder.